starting with number 1 Supermarine Type 224, United Kingdom, 1934. The Type 224 was Supermarine's first attempt to meet an Air Ministry specification for a new monoplane fighter. And it was, by most accounts, a disappointment. Powered by a Rolls-Royce Goshawk engine, relying on evaporative cooling, the aircraft was heavy, slow, and handled poorly. It lost the contract to the Gloucester Gladiator. Yet, without the Type 224's failure, R.J. Mitchell would never have pursued the private venture redesign that became the Spitfire. Its cancellation, in that sense, produced something far greater than itself. 2. Supermarine Type 225, United Kingdom, 1934. Running parallel to the Type 224, the Type 225 was a refined variant exploring alternative configurations under the same F.7/30 specification. It shared many of the fundamental cooling and aerodynamic problems of its sibling and never advanced beyond initial study. The Air Ministry's rejection of the entire F.730 monoplane generation pushed Supermarine toward a cleaner, more elegant solution. The Type 225 is largely forgotten, but it represents a critical stepping stone in the evolutionary chain that ended with one of aviation's most celebrated fighters. 3. Gloucester F.534, United Kingdom, 1937. The Gloucester F.534 was a sleek, 8-gun monoplane that flew in 1937 and demonstrated genuine promise. It met Air Ministry specification F.534 and competed directly against what would become the Hurricane and Spitfire. Performance figures were competitive, and the design was aerodynamically sound. But the RAF had already committed to Hawker and Supermarine, and production lines could not absorb a third type. The F.534 was cancelled with no production order placed. It remains one of the more credible near misses in British fighter development of the 1930s. 4. Bristol Type 133, United Kingdom, 1934. Bristol's Type 133 was a monoplane fighter built to specification F.7/30, featuring an enclosed cockpit and retractable undercarriage at a time when biplanes still dominated RAF thinking. During flight testing in 1934, the aircraft entered an unrecoverable spin and was destroyed, killing the test pilot. The accident ended the program immediately. Had the structural and aerodynamic issues been resolved, the Type 133 might have placed Bristol at the forefront of British fighter development years before the war. Instead, it became a cautionary chapter in early monoplane design. 5. Martin Baker MW.2, United Kingdom, 1938. James Martin's MW.2 was a highly unconventional fighter that flew in 1938 and recorded impressive speed figures. It was built with an emphasis on structural simplicity and ease of production, qualities that would have been enormously valuable in wartime. The Air Ministry reviewed it and declined to place an order, preferring the already established Hurricane. Martin and his partner Valentine Baker continued development, but Baker was killed in a crash of the later MW.3 in 1942. The MW.2 itself was never given a serious production evaluation, and its potential remained entirely untested at operational scale. 6. Martin Baker MW.3, United Kingdom, 1942. The MW.3 was James Martin's most ambitious piston engine fighter, designed around a Napier Sabre engine producing over 2,000 horsepower. It was larger and heavier than most contemporary British fighters, but was expected to achieve outstanding performance. On its 7th flight in September 1942, the engine failed on takeoff and the aircraft crashed, killing Valentine Baker, the co-founder of the company and its primary test pilot. The loss devastated Martin personally and ended the MW.3 program. It marked the end of Martin Baker's fighter ambitions and redirected the company permanently toward ejection seat development. 7. Martin Baker MW.5, United Kingdom, 1944. The MW.5 is widely regarded by aviation historians as potentially the finest piston engine fighter ever produced in Britain. It flew in May 1944 and demonstrated extraordinary handling, exceptional speed, and remarkable ease of maintenance, a quality that distinguished it from nearly every other high-performance fighter of the era. Test pilots praised it without reservation. Captain Eric Brown, one of the most experienced evaluation pilots in British history, described it as the best piston fighter he had ever flown. Despite this, the RAF declined to order it. The war was nearing its end, jets were the future, and there was no industrial space for a new piston type. The M.B.5 never entered service. 8. Hawker P-1047, United Kingdom, 1948. The P-1047 was a naval fighter concept developed by Hawker in the late 1940s to meet fleet air arm requirements for a carrier-capable jet. It incorporated a mixed propulsion approach, a combination of jet and turboprop power, intended to give it both high-speed performance and the low-speed handling characteristics demanded by carrier operations. The concept was technically complex, and the Royal Navy's carrier aviation budgets were contracting sharply in the post-war period. The project did not advance to prototype stage. It represents the kind of ambitious, hybrid thinking that characterized British aviation in the immediate post-war years, before strategic and financial reality imposed its limits. 9. Hawker P-1052, United Kingdom, 1948. The P-1052 was a swept-wing research aircraft developed from the Seahawk, designed to explore the aerodynamic characteristics of swept wings at transonic speeds. 2 prototypes were built and flew from 1948. The data gathered was valuable, but the aircraft itself was always a research tool rather than a combat type. Its direct descendant, the P-1081, moved the design further toward an operational configuration. The P-1052 program illustrated the methodical, incremental approach British aviation took in the transition from straight-wing to swept-wing jet design, careful, measured, and ultimately productive even where the specific airframe was never developed further. 10. Hawker P-1081, United Kingdom, 1950. The P-1081 took the swept-wing configuration of the P-1052 and refined it into something that more closely resembled a true operational fighter. It first flew in 1950 and was offered to Australia, which was evaluating new jet fighters for the Royal Australian Air Force. Performance was promising, and the design was aerodynamically more mature than its predecessors. However, Australia ultimately selected the Canadian-built Avro Canada CF-100, and the British government withdrew funding. The sole prototype was lost in a fatal crash in 1951. The P-1081's potential as an export fighter never materialized, and the program closed without production. 11. Supermarine Type 508, United Kingdom, 1951. The Type 508 was a naval jet fighter prototype developed to meet a fleet air arm requirement for a carrier-based aircraft capable of transonic performance. It featured a distinctive butterfly tail, a V-tail configuration, and a straight wing, which reflected the conservative naval preference for low-speed handling over outright speed. 2 prototypes flew from 1951. The straight wing limited its performance potential, and the design was superseded by the swept-wing Type 525 before any production commitment was made. The Type 508 contributed aerodynamic and systems data to Supermarine's naval jet program, but was itself a transitional design rather than a final answer. 12. Supermarine Type 525, United Kingdom, 1954. The Type 525 brought swept wings to the naval fighter configuration that Supermarine had been developing through the 508 and 529 programs. It first flew in 1954 and represented a significant improvement in performance over its straight-winged predecessors. The design evolved directly into the Supermarine Scimitar, which did enter service with the Royal Navy. In that sense, the Type 525 succeeded, not as a production aircraft in its own right, but as the essential penultimate step that made the Scimitar possible. It was cancelled as a distinct program, but its technical legacy was carried forward intact. 13. Saunders Roe SR-A1, United Kingdom, 1947. The SR-A1 was one of the most unusual British jet aircraft ever built. A jet-powered flying boat fighter designed to operate from sheltered coastal waters without the need for conventional airfields or carriers. 3 prototypes were constructed, and the first flew in July 1947. Performance was reasonable for its time, and the concept addressed a genuine strategic question about operations in the Pacific and Far East. However, the flying boat fighter concept was overtaken by the rapid expansion of land-based airfields and carrier aviation. 2 of the 3 prototypes were lost in accidents. The SR-1 found no production customer and remains a remarkable technological curiosity. 14. Armstrong Whitworth AW-58, United Kingdom, 1954. The AW-58 was a delta-wing supersonic fighter project developed by Armstrong Whitworth to meet emerging RAF requirements for a high-speed interceptor in the early 1950s. The design was technically ambitious, incorporating a pure delta planform at a time when British industry was still accumulating transonic experience. The project was reviewed under the 1957 Defense White Paper, the document that would ultimately cancel much of Britain's advanced aviation industry, and did not survive the review process. It was cancelled before a prototype was completed, leaving its actual performance characteristics entirely a matter of calculation rather than flight test. 15. Fairey FD-1, United Kingdom, 1951. The Fairey FD-1 was a small delta-wing research aircraft built to explore low-speed handling of the delta configuration, particularly the behavior at high angles of attack that would affect combat maneuverability. It was not a combat prototype itself, but a pure research tool. It flew from 1951 and provided data that contributed to Fairey's more ambitious delta programs, particularly the FD-2, which would go on to break the world air speed record in 1956. The FD-1 was limited in scope by design, but it fulfilled its purpose within that narrow remit and directly supported British supersonic research. 16. Fairey FD-2, United Kingdom, 1954. The Fairey FD-2 was not a cancelled project. It flew and succeeded spectacularly, setting the world absolute air speed record of 1,132 miles per hour in March 1956. But its story belongs in this account because what was cancelled was its potential successor. The FD-2's delta wing configuration formed the basis of early design studies for what became the Anglo-French Concorde. Yet the possibility of developing a supersonic British fighter derived from the same research was never seriously pursued. The FD-2 proved Britain could design world-class supersonic aircraft. The question of why that capability was not translated into a production fighter haunted British aviation policy for years. 17. English Electric P-1A, United Kingdom, 1954. The P-1A was the research prototype that established the configuration eventually developed into the English Electric Lightning, the only wholly British supersonic fighter to enter service with the RAF. The P-1A first flew in August 1954 and demonstrated the viability of the stacked engine layout and the thin wing design that defined the Lightning family. It was always a stepping stone rather than an end in itself, and it was superseded by the more powerful P-1B. Its importance lies in what it enabled rather than what it was, and without the P-1A's data, the Lightning could not have been developed on the timeline that it was. 18. Avro 720, United Kingdom, 1956. The Avro 720 was a mixed propulsion point defense interceptor project combining a jet engine with a rocket motor, a configuration intended to achieve extremely rapid climb rates to intercept high-altitude Soviet bombers before they could reach their targets. The concept was technically serious and reflected genuine RAF operational requirements of the mid-1950s. It was cancelled in 1956 before a prototype flew, partly because the rocket-assisted interceptor concept was being pursued more aggressively by other programs, and partly due to the early pressures of defense budget reduction that would culminate in the 1957 White Paper. The Avro 720 never had the opportunity to prove or disprove its design assumptions. 19. Saunders Roe SR.53, United Kingdom, 1957. The SR.53 was a mixed propulsion interceptor that did reach the prototype stage, combining an Armstrong Siddeley Viper jet engine with a de Havilland Spectre rocket motor. 2 prototypes were built, and the first flew in May 1957. Performance was impressive. The aircraft could climb at an extraordinary rate and reach high altitudes rapidly, which was precisely what the RAF needed against Soviet bombers flying at altitude. The program was cancelled following the 1957 Defense White Paper before full development was completed. One prototype was lost in a fatal crash in 1958. The SR.53 was a genuine technical achievement that came within reach of an operational future it was never given. 20. Saunders Roe P-177, United Kingdom, 1957. The P-177 was the intended operational development of the SR-53, a fully weaponized mixed propulsion interceptor that would have entered RAF and Royal Navy service had the program continued. It was more capable than the SR-53, with greater range and a proper armament system. West Germany had expressed serious interest in acquiring it, which would have provided the production volume necessary to make the program economically viable. The 1957 Defense White Paper canceled it anyway, on the grounds that manned fighters were being superseded by guided missiles. It was one of the most consequential cancellations in British aviation history, ending a concept that was technically sound and operationally relevant. 21. De Havilland DH-116, United Kingdom, 1955. The DH-116 was a supersonic fighter project developed by de Havilland in the mid-1950s to meet anticipated RAF requirements for a follow-on to the subsonic Venom. It incorporated a thin delta wing and was expected to achieve supersonic performance in level flight. The project did not reach prototype stage and was overtaken by events, both the advancement of the English Electric Lightning program and the growing financial pressures on British defense spending. De Havilland's focus shifted increasingly toward its missile programs, where government contracts remained available, and the DH-116 was quietly set aside. 22. Hawker P-1103, United Kingdom, 1955. The P-1103 was a Hawker design study for a high-performance interceptor capable of Mach 2 performance, developed in response to Air Ministry Operational Requirement F-155T, one of the most demanding fighter specifications ever issued by the RAF. It featured an advanced configuration and was intended to carry a sophisticated weapons system, including the de Havilland Firestreak missile. The F-155T specification attracted proposals from multiple British manufacturers, all of which were cancelled when the 1957 Defense White Paper concluded that the threat environment no longer justified manned interceptors. The P-1103 was among the most capable designs submitted and was abandoned without a prototype. 23. Hawker P-1121, United Kingdom, 1958. The P-1121 was perhaps the most painful cancellation in post-war British fighter history. Hawker invested significant private funding in its development, convinced that the RAF would eventually require a supersonic strike fighter beyond the Lightning's capabilities. The design was for a large, powerful aircraft capable of Mach 2 performance, with a meaningful weapons load. A prototype was under construction when the 1957 Defense White Paper effectively ended the program by removing the operational requirement it was designed to meet. The partially built airframe was scrapped. The P.1121 represented a serious industrial and financial commitment that the British government's policy shift rendered worthless. 24. Vickers Type 559, United Kingdom, 1957. The Vickers Type 559 was another response to operational requirement F-155T, featuring a canard configuration and twin engines intended to provide the extreme performance the specification demanded. Like every other F.155T submission, it was cancelled in 1957 before hardware was produced. The F-155T cancellation as a whole represents one of the starkest examples of strategic miscalculation in British defense policy. The belief that missiles would replace manned fighters proved premature. Within a decade, the RAF was acquiring the McDonnell Douglas Phantom from the United States to fill the very gap that aircraft like the Type 559 had been designed to fill. 25. English Electric P6, United Kingdom, 1958. The P6 was English Electric's proposal for an advanced development beyond the Lightning, intended to address the Lightning's known limitations in range and weapons carrying capacity. It would have been a significantly more capable aircraft, larger, with greater fuel capacity and a more versatile weapons system. The company that had created Britain's only indigenous supersonic fighter had a credible concept for its successor. The proposal was not developed. British defense policy in the late 1950s and early 1960s moved away from domestic development of major combat aircraft, a shift that culminated in the ill-fated decision to rely on the canceled American TFX program and eventually the purchase of American types. 26. BAC TSR-2, United Kingdom, 1964. The TSR-2 is the most famous cancelled British aircraft of all time, and while it was a strike aircraft rather than a pure fighter, its cancellation shaped British combat aviation for a generation and cannot be absent from this account. It flew in September 1964 and demonstrated extraordinary potential, supersonic at low level, with advanced navigation systems and a range that exceeded any contemporary comparable aircraft. It was cancelled in April 1965 on grounds of cost. The decision was politically controversial from the moment it was made, and it has remained so. The tooling was destroyed on government orders. Britain subsequently ordered the American F-111, then cancelled that order too, and ultimately acquired the Phantom, a less capable replacement at comparable cost. 27. Hawker Siddeley P.1154, United Kingdom, 1965. The P.1154 was to have been the supersonic successor to the Harrier, a vertical and short takeoff aircraft capable of supersonic flight, meeting requirements from both the RAF and the Royal Navy simultaneously. It was a technically ambitious program, and the engineering challenges were substantial. The Royal Navy withdrew from the joint program in 1964, preferring a navalist Phantom. The RAF version continued briefly, but was cancelled in 1965, with the decision driven by cost and the broader contraction of British defense ambitions. The aircraft that flew instead was the subsonic Harrier, an outstanding aircraft, but one that lacked the performance the P.1154 was designed to deliver. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you noticed anything we might have missed or got wrong, let us know in the comments. Your feedback matters. Support the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.